What's up everyone, Trent here, welcome to The Fortress, and my most anticipated biopic of 2019 has released on Netflix, The Dirt, based on the life of Motley Crue, Nikki Sixx, Mick Mars, Tommy Lee, and Vince Neil. It's going to be a crazy story, it is a crazy story, with obviously, probably somewhat embellished tales that really gives you a really good look into the lifestyle that the band led from their early days to the tragic events that occurred later in their lives. So let's break it down. Now the story you can take with a grain of salt. It is based on the novel that was released, the autobiography that was written by Nikki Sixx and others, called The Dirt. So it's one of those things that this has been built with a narrative to really flow through. And they kind of have a tongue-in-cheek kind of dig at this to say, this isn't actually what happened, but for the purposes of the movie, we are including this or excluding this person. So it's kind of got that little tongue-in-cheek, and you can tell that it has been made for Hollywood. So that might alienate and annoy a lot of Motley Crue fans that we are getting kind of inaccuracies. And I'm not going to be focusing on those. I'm just focusing what is in the movie, because I loved this from this first second. There is tragedy, there is laughs, there is triumph, there is heartbreak. This movie takes you through a lot of feels. The first half of the movie is generally kind of more positive, showing how wild and crazy the band are. It really focuses on each member early on and where they came from, how they all formed to meet, which is an inaccuracy in itself. A lot of them didn't meet in Nikki's apartment. But Douglas Booth is Nikki Sixx. Iwan Rheon is Mick Mars. He's probably one of my favorites just because he's so cynical and just a dick to everyone. Machine Gun Kelly is Tommy Lee. He looks like Tommy Lee so much. And David Weber as Vince Neil. Not the chubby Vince Neil, the skinny Vince Neil. So they all do a fantastic job. They introduce themselves. They have some really good voiceovers early on that kind of really show the different personalities. And they have been made in this movie a caricature of themselves. Like, they all have a specific character that they don't really go outside of. Tommy Lee, for instance, is the wild one who has a strong family values, really respects his family, but is essentially a man-child that doesn't know the meaning of no and doesn't know. He's got that reckless abandon attitude. Whereas Nikki Sixx, he's grown up in the broken home. He's the typical angsty teen and just against the world, rebellious. Mick Mars is the cynical older guy, and Vince Neil is the really good-looking lead singer who gets everything he wants and has the perfect lifestyle that ends up falling apart. Each of these characters have semblance of truth, but they are fit for the particular movie to play off each other's characteristics. So it's one of those things that if you know the band, you'll say, okay, this isn't right, but it's really, really fun. Now, the voiceovers are fantastic. You have Tommy Lee coming in and saying, oh God, I was wondering when Nikki's story was going to end, and now it's my turn. And it has a really good kind of montage-y vignette to show how they grew up, where they came from. And I really enjoyed that part. So the first probably half of the movie is focusing on the band as they grow. They play the Forum, the Whisky A Go Go, how they meet their manager and end up being signed to Elektra Records. They're essentially signing their music away, and then they end up getting it back in the end, and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really good. I really like it. Pete Davidson plays Tom Zutaut from Elektra Records. He signs them up, and it's just one of those stories. One of the things that really takes me back in this is the actual scenery and the settings. You feel like you are in the 80s in this, from the grain of the video to the settings that they have of all the bars and restaurants, and even they recreate the Looks That Kill video. They recreate the Shout at the Devil tour stage. They even have the Theatre of Pain stage at one point, and it's just fantastic, the attention to detail that you have. And in the end credits, they actually show comparisons of some of the footage that they've taken from The Dirt and the band footage, and compare it to what was shown in the movie. And they did a very good job, even though obviously it's hard to recreate these things. They look the part, they feel the part, from the makeup to the costuming, everything. And that's where this movie really succeeds. It's a great comedy, but it's also a great tragedy that looks and feels like you are actually following the band. And if you don't know anything about the band, you would be absolutely oblivious and awestruck by what is being shown. Now, in terms of the second half of the movie, this is where it really picks up and a tonal shift happens. And this is probably the best part for me, is seeing the tragedies that occur. The main focus is Nikki Sixx and Mick Mars. They tend to have the biggest issues. Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx and Vince Neil, not Mick Mars. Tommy Lee and Mick Mars's subplots kind of get pushed to the side with a little bit of footage and, you know, story of Mick and his spinal condition coming in. Like they don't really tell it, they more show it in subtle things, like he'll cross his arms and lay down because he's in tremendous pain. And Tommy Lee's subplot of getting married to Heather Locklear and meeting his girlfriend who's introduced to his parents and then he punches her, that's kind of pushed aside, and it really allows for Nikki and Vince to shine. And even the wedding to Heather Locklear with Tommy Lee, that's more Nikki's moment because that's when he's at his worst. Now, Nikki is by far the standout character, the standout person, and that's purely because of his drug addiction and drug habit. I have not read The Dirt. I have read The Heroin Diaries, and you get a really, if you read that and then you see what is being presented, you get a really big appreciation of what he actually had to overcome. So he did technically die at one point, and he had to be brought back, which is done in a very, very fun way for such a tragic thing. The two ambulance officers bickering in that scene is fantastic. But when Nikki is in his addicted and drug-induced state, the lighting, the scenery, everything just really draws you in. 6am wrote a song, The Girl with Golden Eyes, which represents heroin. And at one point, or whenever he is high on heroin, he actually has a golden tinge come onto his skin, showing half his face to represent that high. So that's a nice little touch. But yeah, Vince Neil, very tragic. It goes over his vehicular manslaughter case and the death of his daughter. So once again, you get to appreciate just what these people went through in the band, even though it is embellished a little bit. You get to appreciate what they actually had to overcome and just how messed up they were. It would have been nice to have more focus on Tommy Lee and Mick Mars, particularly with Mick and his condition worsening. Like there was a time period at the very end where time kind of blends and they combine several years into one, because I didn't think his hip surgery happened until much later, and then they said Motley Crue went on to play for another 20 years. I thought that happened in the early 2000s. But yeah, aside from that, you get some really good kind of other actor appearances, musician appearances. Diamond David Lee Roth, he is in there, and Ozzy Osbourne. They aren't playing themselves, obviously. They have actors playing them. But the Ozzy scene is one of the biggest piss takes you'll ever see. He actually snorts piss and snorts ants, and David Lee Roth is just high off his face and a mirror falls on him, and it's great. Probably the worst part of the movie, and the thing that lets it down the most, is the supporting cast. There is some very clunky dialogue, particularly between Nikki and his mother, and some of the supporting cast just really didn't... because probably they weren't the focus, they just felt like the delivery was off and it didn't flow as well, particularly the girls who played the girlfriends throughout the movie. They were pretty kind of weak, and it just, for me, that didn't really hit very well. But aside from that, I loved this movie. The soundtrack, as you would expect, Motley Crue all the way, amazing. They have released the soundtrack with 4 new songs, even though they've disbanded and contractually said, you know, we're not going to tour again. I reckon they'll tour. But yeah, fantastic soundtrack. Looks That Kill, Live Wire, Too Young to Fall in Love, Shout at the Devil. All of them are in there, and they all actually play a really good role in the movie. They set the tone of various scenes. Home Sweet Home is naturally the going home song where they reform, and yeah, tears induce. But they do skip over a lot. It's like Pamela Anderson never existed, neither does Hep C, and they don't really go on to the earlier singers that they had before Vince and all that kind of stuff, and it was glossed over after Vince left, pretty much. But it would be very hard to fit into a movie because the band was so tumultuous and had so many things going on. But for what we got, what was presented, it was a very damn fun movie, and I will be watching it over and over again. And yeah, I'm giving it a 8 out of 10. I loved it, and I hope they continue to do heavy metal biopics. I would love to see an Aussie one or a Metallica one that's not some kind of monster. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on The Dirt below in the comments. I'm Trent. Check out our other videos. Follow our handles at Fortress Nerds on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook if you want to get talking to us, suggest other videos we make, and what other movies you want us to review. And as always, I'm Trent. You're watching The Fortress.